Doesn't he like bite a shark or something? Where he falls in like a pool or something and then bites his way out?
Hello and welcome to the Gandalf's Fist podcast. My name is Dean and I am joined today by Luke 7.
Hello.
And substituting out Stefan, we have today Christopher Ewan.
How do? What a replacement.
We are a progressive rock band from the UK. In our first ever interview a decade ago, we described ourselves as nerds, but well-rounded nerds. And last episode of the podcast, we took a trip down memory lane to talk about our origins. However, today we are going to turn our gaze back to the true purpose of this podcast, talking about geeky questions only Luke dares to ask. Nerd! Today's episode, we're going to talk about James Bond, and we're going to settle an age-old argument. Not who is the best James Bond. That would be too easy. We all know who that is, right, Luke?
Yeah, it's Timothy Dalton.
Wrong.
Roger Moore.
Wrong again. The best Bond is Captain James T. Kirk. Let's face it, Captain Kirk is Space Bond. There are many similarities, yeah? He's got the confidence, he's got the good looks, he's got the suaveness with the ladies.
The tuxedo.
Bond. Fucking Space Bond.
He is. He's got confidence, good looks, suaveness with ladies and space ladies, and he's got hand-to-hand combat prowess. So that is what we're going to look at today. Kicking things off by settling which iterations of Earth James Bond could best James Kirk in a battle. Boom.
Okay, so let's just, we're gonna have to do a quick. Let's go around the room and pick. We need to pick a James Bond.
So we're going to pick a James Bond that could beat Captain Kirk in a battle.
Straight out of the belt, Daniel Craig is a beast. An absolute beast. Like that Casino Royale scene in the bathroom where he's fighting that like Russian mobster. He is absolutely brutal. It's like, you know, up there with one of like the best kind of like Bond screen fights. But I don't think he's the best Bond.
Okay.
I would agree. He's the one that looks most like he could kick your ass in real life. But that's not all of what Bond is about. That more moved towards, you know, the Bourne legacy, that kind of trilogy where they were going for more that realistic thing. Whereas I think a lot of what Bond is about is the vodka martini, shaken not stirred, the smooth morpho kind of thing. Than
okay. Well, let's do this then. How about if we switch it around? Which Bond could Kirk beat instead of which Bond could beat Kirk? Which Bond could Kirk beat?
Lazenby.
Yeah, I was thinking get Lazenby out of there straight away.
You know what? I know we all talk about like which Bond was like, you know, the one we grew up with, but when I was a kid, it was Roger Moore was the Bond. View to a Kill was like, that was kind of like my first introduction with like Christopher Walken and Grace Jones and stuff. But well, Roger Moore was a product of the 70s, and I would say that James Kirk. You know, just to clarify, we're talking about Shatner. We're not talking about the new iteration of Chris Pine. We're talking about Shatner. So Shatner could kick Roger Moore's ass all day long.
Okay, interesting. So you think he could kick Roger Moore's ass and he could kick George Lazenby's ass?
Yeah.
Chris?
I would dispute that Roger Moore defeat, because the great thing about Roger Moore, if you think in the Bond films, so like Man with the Golden Gun, one of my favourite Bond moves ever is where he's at some dojo and they both go to bow, and as the guy bows, he kicks him in the face. King of the cheap shot. And I think Roger Moore is the biggest cheap shot of all the Bonds, and that might fare him well against old Kirky boy.
I agree with Chris. I don't think Kirk could beat Roger Moore in a fight.
Really?
I think that one thing we are massively overstating here is the prowess of Kirk's fighting, because he is such an iconic guy and he is sort of swashbuckling through the galaxy, you know, fighting everyone and shagging everyone.
He's the space Jack Sparrow now then, isn't he?
But he's fighting. I don't think he's all that good, right? So, like, for example, Roger Moore, if we're going to take it as like a package, like, he like does a lot of like judo sort of stuff in the James Bond. Like a lot, I know it's a bit cliche, like the karate chop and stuff like that. You know, waka, you know. But he like trained doing Queensberry rules boxing and judo, so that when he was doing the Saint in the 60s, he could be like the suave gentleman sort of guy who fought, but only ever fist fought using Queensberry rules boxing and judo. So when he did James Bond, he sort of brought, it wasn't quite as like nimble as when he was doing the Saint, but he brought actual genuine martial arts training to it.
I think that's where my like thing of Roger Moore's tainted, because I love View to the Kill so much, but it was his last film. It was like 85 they did that.
Yeah.
He's already getting on by that point. I think he was well into his 50s by that point. And I think that's tainted my view. Yeah, you're right. If you go back to the early 70s, that kind of, you know, the Saint Roger Moore, that James Bond, yeah, like you say, the early ones, Man with the Golden Gun and that kind of thing. Yeah, no, I can agree with that. Should we?
Roger Moore is out.
No, should we talk about the elephant in the room? Let's talk about everybody's favourite James Bond, Mr. Sean Connery.
I think because he's a bit of a brawler and there's a bit of judo in there as well. I know that they definitely tried to keep like judo in it from the early ones, because in the original novels, James Bond was a judo man. So I think there was a bit of that going on with like, you know, throws and flips and stuff. It hints at some kind of martial art training. So, and is a bit of a like brawler as well. You know, you can imagine like Connery Bond going to town and not really holding any punches. Why do you think that Kirk could beat Connery?
I mean, they're both. I mean, both of those characters are products of the same era. You know, one of them was, you know, basically. I mean, they were basically the top of their game at the same time. You know, those early Bond films started in 60, 62, 63, and like Star Trek's like 66, I think. So it's like it's a similar era. I don't know. They're like, and again, you think about like Kirk's last appearance in Star Trek Generations, where he takes on Malcolm McDowell on that mountain because Picard got his ass handed to him. Even that Kirk, I'm reckoning, you know, there's a planet saved, you know, all that kind of thing. He just gets up there and it's like, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna beat the crap out of this guy.
I don't know, like if we're gonna say like at the time that Shatner was in that sort of physical shape doing Kirk then. Like, Sean Connery wasn't doing Bond anymore by a long, 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 long way. And, like, contemporary movies of the time, stuff like The Rock with Nicolas Cage and stuff like that, a classic. If that was still Bond, which it is sort of, a little bit is, like, he is sort of a British sort of agent that's gone to Alcatraz. They're playing a lot on him being, like, a former sort of spy. So that's as close as you're going to get, like, The Rock as, like, Sean Connery doing, like, James Bond, I guess, as a sort of older guy. I think that Connery is going to whoop Captain Kirk in his like girdle, scampering up a mountain or riding his horse around, chopping wood or whatever he's doing in that film.
Gonna rip off that girdle and choke him with it.
Yeah.
Yes. You die now, please.
So I don't think so. I think nowhere. I mean, so if you think about that, you've got the raw brawling power and manliness of Connery. You've got the like judo and Queensberry rules boxing of Roger Moore. Daniel Craig, he did all that like Filipino martial arts stuff in his version of Bond. Like Chris says, it was trying to be more like the Bond sort of movies with like those kind of martial art things.
Just to clarify, we're not talking about Pierce Brosnan, right?
See, I've got love for Pierce Brosnan because of the GoldenEye game. So that alone, I think, just made that film perfection.
Well, I never had a Nintendo 64.
Oh, you missed out.
I was still clutching onto the corpse of my Sega Saturn with tears like dripping down my
I thought
cheeks.
You were going to say your Commodore 64.
Wasn't too far away. I had like Commodore 64, a Mega Drive, and then I falsely plumped it for the Sega Saturn, being like a loyal Sega boy.
Mark did that, but we got the N64 and a 4-player game with 4 brothers was golden times. Yeah, I do like Brosnan, but...
Well, I'm going to come back to like Luke's first pick, which was that Kirk could beat Lazenby in a fight. Again, like Lazenby trained with Bruce Lee before like Bruce Lee died. He was training with George Lazenby because he was going to be in a movie with him. So instantly, I think that gives him an advantage.
Was it actual training though, or is that kind of an urban myth? Like I once walked past Mike Tyson in a corridor and absorbed his venomous punches.
You instantly want to start biting ears.
Yeah. Give me that ear. I want to bite it. Nom, nom, nom.
I just read somewhere that's what the case was. Now, it didn't say that he was training, like, fighting with Bruce Lee. He could have been, like, training tiddlywinks.
Finger exercise.
Yeah, hungry hippos training. Something. Yeah.
Okay, anyway, that wasn't my first pick. My first pick was Dalton, and he's still my pick.
What, Dalton to beat Kirk?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know we're not talking about that, but he's my favourite Bond. He always has been.
Okay.
He just is. I have
a soft spot for Dalton as favourite Bond because he was like the bridging gap before like they started making Bond movies again. So like, and I was quite young when the last one came out. Was it License to Kill? The last one with Dalton. So that came out when I was when me and Chris are the same age. So we've maybe been about like 5 or something when that came out.
No, I think it was 89 and 90. So you would have been 3 or 4, I think.
Basic maths.
Probably first time it was on TV was probably when you were like 5 or something. So
we went to the cinema to see it either, so it would have been telly, which in those days was.
You say that though, Chris. I cannot count that out. That I was took to the cinema to see that because when I was 4, my dad decided to take me to go see Ghostbusters 2 because that came out the same year in 1989, and it terrified the crap out of me because I liked the cartoon was all the rage, and I was massively into the real Ghostbusters cartoon, and I had all the toys and all that kind of stuff. And the little plastic proton packs. Ghostbusters 2 came out of the cinema, took me to see it when I was 4 years old. And the scene where those like ghosts burst out of the courtroom, where there's the
electric chair guys.
Yeah, the electric chair guys, and I just scream, and you can see why.
It's Ghostbusters 2.
4 years old.
It's Ghostbusters 1. Is it with the creepy woman in the library? Is that the start of Ghostbusters 1?
That's the one that goes, yeah!
Ghostbusters 2 is Vigo the Carpathian.
Vigo, and the classic...
You know what?
And the Rivers of Slime!
It gets a bad rap, that movie, Ghostbusters 2, but I rewatched it recently, and it's not as good as the first one, but it's still pretty damn good.
Oh, it's really good. It's really good. I've watched it. I've got it on DVD. I've watched it many, many times the last 10 years.
I love the line, though, by Dan Aykroyd, where he goes... What is it? Shh. Do you smell that? Because you've got to hear to smell. Or where a ghost performs certain acts.
Oh, yeah.
Which...
That's the first one. That's the first one, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Ray, you dirty dog.
Anyway, there's a tangent for you. Anyway.
So probably, when I was a kid, and my dad was massively into like spy stuff. Like it was like bit like all those people, like maybe your dads would say, like during that in the Cold Wars, all that kind of stuff, which was still sort of just fizzling out as this movie came out. Spy stuff was like spy movies, spy stories. That was like the new thing, wasn't it? The thing that everyone was into. Like going back 50 years earlier, it was all cowboy movies. And then in the 50s, it was all like space stuff and space serials. And then like spy stuff, just like James Bond, The Saint, all that kind of stuff. And so like he was massively into James Bond and spies and stuff like that. So I can very much imagine that like this was my first exposure to James Bond being like 6, 7, 8. That was the latest Bond movie that came out. It wasn't till I was... So like when did GoldenEye come out?
95.
97? 95. Okay, so I'll be like 10 then. So that... I definitely saw James Bond before I was 10. So, yeah, Dalton, probably, I would definitely rank him up there just for, like, first experience of Bond. However, I don't think that he's going to beat Captain Kirk in a fight.
Okay.
Because, remember at school, right? All your, like, when you were, like, 6 and stuff like that, and, like, your parents would, like, pick you up, and then there'd be all the other parents, like, picking up all your friends. Everybody had a friend whose dad... looked like Timothy Dalton. Yeah. He just looked like your mate's dad. Everybody, and I bet you did, and if you didn't have a friend whose dad looked like Timothy Dalton, then your dad probably looked like Timothy Dalton.
Yeah, I was
the kid.
I was kind of thinking back in the 80s, my dad did a little bit look like Timothy Dalton.
Did old Ozzy used to look like TD?
Not so much Tino, because he didn't have curly hair, whereas my dad has the curly locks. So my dad looked more like the golfer Colin Montgomery. Who was probably friends with Timothy Dalton.
And that's fair enough, like, because everybody also had a friend whose dad looked like Colin Montgomery.
There was a lad at school who looked like Colin Montgomery, actually. Like a 12-year-old boy like Colin Montgomery.
Well, probably chip off the old block, to be honest. So Dalton, I just can't look at him. And when you like to see him like in barroom fights and stuff like that, it just looks like, somebody's dad's walked into the wrong pub for a piss and just got into a fight,
Right then, so is it going to come down to the classic then? Is it Moore versus Connery?
I think so. It's sort of just come that down where I think Pierce Brosnan, he isn't like a physical sort of guy, isn't he? Like even like if you put him in stature, he's probably similar in stature to Dalton. But Dalton is that sort of is short but muscular and compact, like corned beef.
But a golf merengue for you there.
Fucking hell.
Plus actor.
See, this is why we had to get Chris on the podcast. So
Jesus Christ, you two sync periods there, like.
So I think it does come down to those two. And what we need to factor in here is, well, let's just think about what Captain Kirk's fighting style is like. You do have the cliched like chop. He just randomly fucking just chop someone, But then he's got the two-handed, like over the head sort of two-handed punch where he puts his two hands together into like what is surely impractical fist that breaks every finger in your hands, and then just like proceeds to completely telegraph this punch over the course of about 45 seconds before it hits the person,
It's like a proper pro wrestling move, like a double axe handle kind of.
Yeah.
I think so. If we just go, if we talk about Kirk for a little minute, he's aggressive. That's one thing that I think he's got going for him. He's a ball of rage, that man. Like literally, and that's something you don't see because obviously Bond, he's cold, he's calculating, he's a murderer. Whereas obviously Kirk's just an angry man, and I think either of these guys, I think he's taking them. The fighting style aside, judo and all that kind of thing, I think you get Kirk riled up, he'll destroy a planet. He's not going to care about some British spy for, you know what I mean? I just genuinely, I'm like, no matter who we pick, it's Kirk all day long for me. Like,
but what if they use his anger against? Because Bond is the smart fighter as well. He'll use cheap shots, and if they can use Kirk's anger against him, then just a sneaky, like, oh, I'm so angry, and he loses the plot. Whereas Bond playing it cool just tires him out. I'd imagine he wouldn't have good cardio, so if he's angry, he'll run after you. So Bond would just be smart and tire him out. Run up and down the cliff tops.
There is that thing where people think that Kirk's down, and then he'll do the cheap shot as well. You were talking about Roger Moore.
Yeah,
like the backs will be turned, and Kirk will go. He'll
rock on the back of the head.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Kirk also has like an entourage of people that he has like to back him up. Whereas Bond is always like a lone wolf. He's not like team fighting with anyone.
No, well, technically, Sean Bean 006 backs him up in GoldenEye, but then he turns on him.
CIA operative Felix, whatever his name is.
And good old Q.
So, both of these franchises both have somebody called Q in them, So you've got Q from James Bond, making all the gadgets, and you've got Q from Star Trek, although he doesn't appear till Next Generation, and he's not making gadgets. He's just turning up and making people dress like James Bond. Not James Bond. What's he making them dress like? Robin Hood. That would be a good.
He's making chaos. That's what he's making.
That is the episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation I wanted to see. Where they get stuck in the holodeck and they're all James Bond.
Hasn't he got like infinite power pretty much? And he decides to use said power.
Genuinely, no matter what gadgets Q's coming up with, guys, Q's a god, pretty much. Q's there and goes, oh, look at my exploding umbrella, and Q goes, poof, and it turns into like, you know, a bunch of daffodils or whatever. You know what I mean? It's
what Robin? Did you see? Turns them into Robin dressing like Robin Hood.
Yeah, have you not seen this episode?
No, which Robin Hood? Not the Kevin Costner Prince of Thieves.
No,
Robin Hood.
So like proper Errol Flynn. So like I can't remember the setup to this episode whatsoever. It was just one of these mad. Every so often, like there's these mad episodes in Star Trek: The Next Generation. Sometimes it's like deep and philosophical, and sometimes it's just like, right, let's go into the holodeck and run around dressed as like Sherlock Holmes. or Q turns up, and then like all of a sudden the entire cast is dressed like Robin Hood. So it's like proper like Errol Flynn sort of get up, like with tights and like, you know, bright green and bright pink sort of tights and stuff, and feather in the hat.
There's the classic Worf line of I am not a merry man.
I am not a merry man. Yeah. It's just there with like a pink Will Scarlet, I think he's got this bright red tights on. And it's just full Worf, still got the like Klingon face, and I am not a merry man, you know.
I feel like they wrote that whole episode just so he could crack that line.
Yeah, 100% they did.
I know. I reckon this was like pure like Patrick Stewart, like kind of him. This is the kind of thing where he would have absolutely loved to dress up like Errol Flynn and run around doing like sword fighting and stuff. It's just one of these things where it's just like they shrug their shoulders. It's just like, I guess we're Robin Hood now. Better get on with it, and you know.
Good lord.
Good lord, you know.
Make it so.
Yeah. So I think you're right. So we're agreeing that due to being a ball of rage, Shatner would beat any iteration of Bond. Okay.
We could go down the route of just it's an epic battle and Bond keeps thinking he's winning, and then just in the end, victory by like Rocco.
Or Kirk just goes, yeah, nuke the planet.
Yeah.
Right, Dean, I've got a battle for you then. So there's a character in the Roger Moore era, James Bond, of Jaws. He's a beefy guy. He's an angry guy. There's an angry guy in The Next Generation. He's a Klingon. He's called Worf. Who would win in a fight between those two guys?
Ooh, Worf versus Jaws. Now, first of all, let me just shout out to Mr. Reynolds. Hopefully you're still with us, Mr. Reynolds, my English teacher from back in the day, who looked exactly like Jaws.
Not Timothy Dalton.
not Colin Montgomery.
No, and he didn't look like Worf either. He looked exactly like Jaws. I don't know. You know, that's a difficult one. What's your initial take then, Chris? Jaws v. Worf.
Size over power, really, isn't it? If you think like, so Jaws, the guy who plays Jaws in Happy Gilmore, where he's after shooting McGavin. Whoa. He is a huge man, and he beats the crap out of Happy Gilmore. In Bond, he's an absolute beast, like, as well, with those metal teeth as well.
It's been ages since I've seen that era of films, but isn't the one where he chews through like a metal cable in a cable car or something like that?
Yeah.
With his, yeah.
Doesn't he like bite a shark or something to death, where he falls in like a pool or something, and then bites his way out? The shark. That feels like a trippy dream, but I'm sure something like that happens.
Basically, there's nothing in those films that can defeat him apart from love. Because essentially in Moonraker, he ends up on the space station, and there's the typical nerdy blonde girl with the big glasses, and he falls happily in love, and that's the end of his anger. And at the end, he even waves to James Bond to thank him for introducing him to this kind of lovely lady. But literally, it's the only thing that can defeat him. So what defeats all that anger and all that hate and all that strength in the end is the love of a good woman.
Oh, and see, Worf won't be able to bring that because, as we've just said, he's not a merry man. So he wouldn't be able to bring that love to bring him down.
I don't think love would be a weakness for Worf. In fact, I'm pretty sure, I can't remember this accurately, but doesn't at some point he end up being hooked up with Deanna Troi?
Yes.
In the sort of...
Yeah, the last season. Yeah, he does.
Yeah. And it seemed like he was purely doing that as just to get a rise out of Riker to see what the hell he did about it. He had no emotional...
It's mentioned... I'm sure it's mentioned in one of the later films. You know, the one where... You know, the Insurrection, where they all end up on the planet and, like... they all get young and they all get like hot and sexy again. And like
apart from Worf, who ends up going through a second puberty.
Yeah, because it's like there's the famous scene in that where Deanna Troy's shaving Riker in the bath.
Yeah, shaving his back.
But yeah, there's a comment in that about that Riker's happy, like Worf's happy for like Deanna for being with like Riker and stuff. But yeah, anyway.
You used to shave my back.
But like even Worf having like a son. He absolutely hates his son. Like, honestly, like, absolutely. I mean, the child's annoying. All children in, we talked about this in the last nerdy one about Wesley Crusher, but all the children in Star Trek are annoying. There are no non-annoying children in the entirety of the Star Trek franchise.
I agree. Worf, for all his prowess, he is the worst. He really is, isn't he? He hates his kid, And I know all the kids in Star Trek are annoying, but like, other people's kids are supposed to be annoying. You're supposed to like your own kid, Even Kirk liked his own kid shortly before the Khan moment. And Patrick Stewart did eventually meet, like Picard did meet one of his, like he had a sort of many illegitimate children. There was an episode where he met like his son, who wasn't a kid at the time, I guess. But you're supposed to like your own kids, and Worf. So he has no emotional weakness. So I think Worf would probably win because all he needs to do is like introduce a sexy lady on the side as a bit of a distraction. And there you go.
Oh,
one of those.
Because Worf, you've said, is like he's quite manipulative. So going to bed with Deanna Troy just for a laugh to be like, yeah, get some of that. So he could like fake a bromance with Jaws and be like, oh, we're best buddies kind of thing. Like shake his hand, like
that's
wrestling
it. And he
style.
starts to cry.
And Jaws is like, I've got my best friend. Like, we're closer than anyone on this planet. And then cheap shot dead.
Yeah, with one of those that Klingon like frisbee thing just takes his head off. Whack.
Aye, yep. Unless Jaws catches it in his teeth. But if he throws it from behind, then that rules that one out.
I really think each one of these situations, you imagine like Worf saying, I'm not a merry man. And he really should say that in every episode because it's a perfect catchphrase for him because he really is not a merry man.
I think that could be the reveal to how he's going to turn on Jaws. Like, they call each other the merry men, like, oh, merry men for life. And then he, like, turns.
They have T-shirts.
I am not a merry man.
I am not a merry man.
Dead.
Yeah.
Right, gents, I've got one more for you. So,
okay.
There's another famous Bond character which we haven't talked about yet, and that is the diminutive figure of Oddjob.
Oh,
with his steel-rimmed hat. Now, I was trying to work out who we could tag him up against. There's a few engineers, there's a few characters, there's people we could, No. We've talked enough about that dick. Anyway, so what I thought was, there's a character. He started in Next Generation. He then did 7 seasons of DS9. I'm talking about the one and only, the Mr. Oddjob. I'm talking Miles O'Brien.
Oh my god!
You guys, you never watched DS9, did you?
Yeah, but I know Miles O'Brien is he? I reckon he's an angry guy as well.
Yeah, he is. Chris, DS9.
No, so I don't know. I know of it, but wouldn't know him. So
he's basically in the early seasons of the Next Generation. He's the transporter guy. He's it's just like that's it. That's his job. And then basically, when DS9 opens, they ship that character across.
Yeah.
But
along with Worf
later on once Next Gen had finished. But anyway, so little bit of like information on Miles O'Brien. He has like a wife. They have a kid on like DS9. They were basically like the kind of Geordie and Data characters doing like funny things in the holodeck in Next Generation.
Robin Hood based banter.
Yeah, basically O'Brien and Bashir are those characters in DS9.
Right.
But I have one thing to say about O'Brien. There's an episode where he's like goes like hunting basically after this like militant gang, and he basically goes like undercover on this planet. And he's brutal. He's literally like, he's a bit bumbling, but he's like, he's like kicking ass and taking names in that episode. So, I'm gonna have a half vote for Miles O'Brien. Although, having said that, there is Odd Job on the other side of this.
This is the weirdest fight in the world. Why have we picked this as a battle?
Because we needed an Odd Job man to take on Odd Job.
I know who he is. He's the one with hair like Colin Montgomery. First time I watched it.
Yeah, he's definitely got woolly hair. Definitely.
Yeah. It's like Chrissy's dad's but beaming people up left, right, and centre. Which Oswin may or may not be doing in his spare time. I cannot confirm.
Not that I know of, but I would not be surprised. Beam me up, Ozzy.
He's just the kind of guy who sort of presses the button and makes the thing go. Whoa, 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 whoa. That's all he does. Whereas Odd Job, the only thing he does is throw a hat. So it's the weirdest fight in the world. which because it's the weirdest fight, I'm intrigued. I am. Because you've got somebody who has a hat versus somebody who has the power of an entire starship.
So you could throw a hat and then it's about to hit him and kill him, and then he transports.
You could just transport it off,
Oh, it's gone. And then what does Odd Job have?
He's a tiny powerhouse man. He could do the old chop.
He could get his belt.
Yeah, that's it. No, he's a vicious little monster. That's his job. He's an assassin. He's a
on top of the fact that the bumbling engineer probably doesn't know that Odd Job's hat is steel rimmed and chop your head off, so he'll see you coming and be like, I'm the bumbling engineer, I've got no problems. He's just chucked the hat at us, dead.
Yeah, I agree. As weird as this matchup is, you probably have. So we got 2-1 to Star Trek versus.
No, 3-1.
3-1.
Yeah, because Kirk, Worf, and Q.
Okay, so in our dream fighting team of this weird meshed up universe, on our side we have Captain James T. Kirk as played by William Shatner. Yeah?
Yeah.
We have Q, but Star Trek Q, not old man who makes laser watches Q. And who else do we have?
Worf.
We have Worf. Yeah, Worf versus Jaws. Okay, and then finally making up the final member of our ultimate fighting team, who we have Odd Job.
Aye.
Okay. What a guy.
Not to be
indeed.
confused with Random Task from Austin Powers. It throws his shoe, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, in the future, all of the Bond characters are going to be dead anyway, because it's the future. So in essence, death has won.
And I'd just like to say, if that is the case and the Bond people are all dead, then technically that's abuse of the dead. So, you sick creeps.
What we sort of need to do now is figure out in what kind of weird situation this is actually taking place. And I think the only way that this could actually be a real life situation is one that is created by Q himself. He has reanimated all of these people from an old 20th century movie franchise in order to just really muck around with people on the Enterprise. So that being said, you have to take Q out of the equation because he wouldn't be fighting for anyone. It's a draw.
Yeah, a draw. Yeah, a draw's fair.
Well, but then if it is a draw, then Q wins. Yes.
Yeah.
So then Star Trek wins.
Yeah. Unless you did mean Bond Q there. What about if by messing around with the realms of time that he accidentally transfers all of his power to Bond Q, who then, of course, fights for Bond?
Bond Q, yeah, maybe Bond Q is QQ.
Yep. He's just an earlier version.
Wow. Q wins.
That would explain why he's always at the cutting edge of technology and how he can do things that seemingly are impossible for the time. Laser watches were impossible at the time that they were in James Bond. Ejector seats were impossible to fit into cars. Making a car go invisible is impossible, full stop.
Making a car
These are
go
impractical
underwater.
Things. Yeah, these are things that were impossible. And some of them you could do with massive amount of engineering now, but definitely not at the time. And nobody can make an invisible car. So what I would say is that Q is Q, and he's just mucking around and just dabbling in that sort of time period as an old man.
For a laugh. So, just for the record, who is this Miles O'Brien, dickhead? Wait, there's someone at my window.
I am Chief Miles Edward O'Brien.
Oh,
I'm very
God.
much alive, and I intend to stay there.
God!
So that appears to be the end of Chris.
He's gone, beamed off into space, never to be seen again.
That wasn't Miles O'Brien, it was his dad coming to pick him up. Okay, right, so we need to name this episode of the podcast, and I think it's like we did last time. We come up with an individual name for the episode. We called it Pele and the Tale of the Golden Weasel, which summarized what that one was all about. And I think that this is less of a one-off. I think that we probably will do some future duels or fights, but I prefer to call them fracas. So I think we should call them fictional fracas. Bond versus Kirk, where we have a draw.
A draw.
Or Q wins.
Q wins.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast.
Cheese Toasty.
Cheese Toasty, yes. And I hope you've enjoyed it. It is a shame that Chris got beamed off to go wherever he had to go. And Luke, I noticed you got a hell of a lot more considered and articulate as the last 20 minutes of that discussion took place. It's a shame Stefan couldn't join us. He was having a balcony installed.
Likely.
And Ben was tending to his vineyard, his orchard. He was berating a peasant on the streets of Tuscany or something like that. You have been listening to Fictional Fracas, Bond versus Kirk. And we will see you again next time.